Hello, everybody. Welcome back for the final match of this weekend. My name is Maeve O'Rourke. I'm here with Gabby. Gabby, this World Cup has been absolutely insane. You guys had a great match last round, and we have some really incredible teams coming up. I'm sure everybody in chat, I believe, was also very excited about what's going to happen for this World Cup.
Yeah, even though the US is out of the tournament, Spain will be moving on into the top four level matchup playing out in this next round. Ashton. So let's go ahead into this. As, I don't think that, like you mentioned, Maeve, we saw some pretty so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Some really exciting stuff from that last round. Able to see that team twice in a row with that Gyarados, though. Won't be taking a look at the team scoreboard here just because it is not fully updated from that round that we had a little bit ago. Spain has moved on, though, into the semifinals with this top four. So very exciting to see for Spain. We have for Spain for their player, Rafa Busutil. And Rafa, he's going to be running a Groudon team with a twist here with Entei, Rillaboom, Latias, Grimmsnarl, and Ditto. So Ditto a really fun Pokemon, but Latias is something we don't see all too much. Something I said to Gabby too in that break. Latias gets access to Ally Switch, so if you can help set your Ditto up to come in a really advantageous spot to maybe get yourself a second restricted, you can put yourself in a really nice position moving forward.
Yeah, you can. And apologies. Interesting, really an interesting team, and I can't wait to see in particular how Ditto is going to work out in this game. And yeah, I apologize. I'm a because my microphone keeps cutting out. Maeve, why don't you lead us through as
Absolutely.
I debug?
Absolutely. I will lead us through. Rafa, though, one of these incredible players from Spain. He has some great achievements just from the past year alone. Top 16 Players Cup 4, top 12 Players Cup 3 global, top 16 VR Winter Series qualifier number 2. So very great showing from this Spanish player who I'm excited to be able to feature today. But his opponent, if we go over to the other side, is another great player from the United States. Somebody who I'm sure pretty much everybody's familiar with at this point if you've been following Pokemon for any length of time. You're going to be Ashton Cox, a 2 times regional champion, a 2 times international champion, and he's going to be running a Pokemon that he loved during Ultra Series, I believe, and maybe even Moon Series as well, with that Lunala, and he's going to be bringing the Volcarona, the Regieleki, which I'm sad Lou cannot be here to see, Rillaboom, Grimmsnarl, and Dragonite. So Dragonite, another interesting Pokemon to be bringing to matchups like these, a Pokemon that actually gets inner focus as well, similar to Entei, so it can't be flinched and it cannot be intimidated. So having that Dragonite could be a little bit nicer, especially if you're kind of dealing with a Pokemon that can go for that Intimidate. Lunala, a Pokemon that typically runs Trick Room, but you're seeing a lot of Pokemon in here that like to go a little bit faster. Lunala also gets access to Tailwind, so being a Tailwind user means that this Lunala may be able to speed up its partners, especially if that Regieleki is carrying something like a Scarf maybe. So having that Scarf could be pretty helpful if it's trying to go faster than the opponents on Rafa's side. So, a Groudon can be a pretty tough matchup to deal with, especially with a Lunala where you don't have double targeting moves like that Groudon with that Precipice Blades. But having that Moongeist Beam can mean that you can do some really big damage along with Meteor Beam that we're seeing a lot of these Lunala carrying while holding that Power Herb. Gabby, are you back with me here to talk a little bit about this?
I think I am. So
Lovely. You sound great.
I think I just got a little bit too loud there because I was too excited. So apologies. I am going to spend a moment talking just to see if I do cut in and out again, but it looks like my voice is back. So thank you.
You sound perfect. You sound lovely.
Maeve. Thank you, Maeve, for walking us through that lovely team preview, our player profile preview, I should say, as like you were mentioning, this is going to be a really exciting match, and I can't wait to jump into team preview and get this game started.
Absolutely. I'm loving both of these teams. I know that it's going to be great to see the items that we're going to have on these Pokemon. We're seeing a lot of really interesting items as this metagame shapes up. And one thing I'm loving, Rocky Helmet Latias, Gabby. I think that's something that I haven't really seen in a long time. Also shows that Grimmsnarl is the one with that Light Clay. And the White Herb on that Groudon to prevent any Intimidates from coming out is going to be great, but no Intimidates on Ashton's side of the field.
Yeah, definitely not a item that's going to come as in handy as this Groudon would have liked, but really cool information for us. I think what I want to figure out from Rafa's side of the field is how exactly he's going to approach this matchup. You know, Lunala is one of those Pokemon, thanks to its Shadow Shield ability, that has a decent amount of bulk at the beginning of a game, you know, before it takes any damage. And usually when playing a Pokemon like Lunala, you look for those ghost type attacks or those dark type attacks that can do big damage after you do a little bit of damage with something like an Icy Wind or you know, some other chip move to get rid of the Shadow Shield. And it doesn't necessarily look like Rafa has access to that. Knowing that Entei's Choice Scarf does open up the possibility for some more coverage moves to, you know, cover those kind of types. And also the Ditto as well opens up a few interesting options, as you could just decide to duplicate the Lunala and utilize its Moongeist Beam to your own advantage. So I'm very curious to see this first leads for these trainers, because I think that's really going to determine just what kinds of strategies these trainers have in mind going into this game one.
Yeah, and these leads will be coming out. The Lunala and the Grimmsnarl, so a great lead for screens if we have them. And then the Grimmsnarl and the Entei. So two shiny. Shiny Grimmsnarl is one of those really fun shinies for me, Gabby, just seeing that. But also I realized this is, I think, our first game without a Incineroar today as well on either side.
Well, that's always something to celebrate, I think. It only took us 15 games or whatever in this series, but it's always nice to see that. And also always nice to see Thunder Wave as an option on Grimmsnarl, as that could be a really cool form of speed control by Rafa in this game one. But looking at the Grimmsnarl and the Lunala across the field, I think that Rafa does have to be a little bit more careful, as, you know, not on top of Shadow Shield, this Lunala is also going to have the benefit of a Reflect or a Light Screen to boost defenses up even higher, which is going to be really tough for even a strong Pokemon like Groudon to power through.
Yeah, Groudon does switch in here for the Entei, while a Light Screen goes up to protect it. Or sorry, a Reflect goes up to protect it. Grimmsnarl here, though, goes for Fake Tears, an interesting move to carry to drop down the special defense here of this Groudon. But the White Herb now being revealed. Really nice to actually have that Light Herb, even without any sort of Intimidate here. Lunala will go for that Moongeist Beam, should go into that Groudon who was targeted with that Fake Tears. It won't do as much as they wanted, but it still does about 50%. We'll be able to take it out on that next hit.
That White Herb was surprisingly huge in this matchup, as if it was allowed to stick on that Groudon, Lunala would have been able to knock it out really easily. You know, unfortunately for Rafa, he is still at a point where a second Moongeist Beam will most likely pick up a KO, which is why he is forced to protect this Groudon this turn. I'm curious what this Grimmsnarl has access to and what will be able to help him stop the Lunala at this point.
Yeah, a Spirit Break from one Grimmsnarl onto the other does a good bit of chip damage here. Super effective technically because of that Dark type, and it does also drop that special attack. Grimmsnarl will go for a will go for a Foul Play here. So that Foul Play will do a really good amount of damage to that Lunala, will break its Shadow Shield, but that Lunala wasn't able to get its own Moongeist Beam off due to this Protect.
No, it wasn't, and that's going to give Groudon the opportunity to get one more attack in, most likely. Again, it's going to be a bit of a close roll here, and I don't think that Rafa is going for any moves that'll necessarily weaken the power of the Moongeist Beam in this second turn, but Ashton just doing a very good job so far of keeping the pressure on and ensuring those knockouts even when Groudon tries to go for those defenses.
Yeah, and that Light Screen is not going to help too much with that Fake Tears to possibly cancel it out here. Moongeist Beam once again from this Lunala should hopefully take out this Groudon here for Ashton to be able to get him in a better position moving forward. That Fake Tears with a critical hit, absolutely huge, I think, for Ashton to now get this Groudon off the field, which is definitely a big threat to some of his Pokemon, especially if he had something like the Regieleki or the Volcarona in the back.
Exactly, but instead it's going to be the Entei taking the field for Rafa, which, again, I want to see more info about this Entei, as we do know it's holding a Choice Scarf. That is going to mean it has to pick a single move to last it the next few turns, and I think Rafa very smartly doubling into that Lunala to ensure that it's knocked out, as Lunala really the big Pokemon that he has to be afraid of moving forwards in this game. We've seen that the Grimmsnarl on Ashton's side of the field does have access to Spirit Break, but that's not really going to be doing any damage to an Entei, and the screens are already up on the field, and if you're assuming that Ashton's Grimmsnarl is holding Light Clay, as many do, you can ignore it for a couple of turns at this point, since it's not going to be able to do too much, but these fake tears will continue to keep adding up unless Rafa is able to attack that Lunala first.
Yeah, actually able to attack with this Thunder Wave to slow it down may allow that Entei to go first because of that speed drop. So that Entei will go for a Sacred Fire into the Lunala. We'll be able to knock it out. So even though this Entei did take a fake Tears from that very dramatic Grimmsnarl on Ashton's side, it's not going to be able to take advantage of it until maybe a later turn.
And Rafa does have the opportunity to switch that Entei around as well to drop the special defense boost. It's possible that whatever Pokemon Ashton's going to send in won't be a special attacker, and as a result, Entei might not have to switch it at all either, which would be a very interesting position. That being said, I think it's likely that Ashton has either the Volcarona or the Regieleki in the back of his party, given that he has been going pretty aggressively for those fake tears. And, you know, it's a very smart play, I think, especially if you are Grimmsnarl, as once you get your reflects and light screens and whatnot set up on the field, there's really is only so much Grimmsnarl can do. And by going for fake tears, I think that you really put a lot of pressure on the opposing side of the field to switch things around, whereas Rafa has opted for a Thunder Wave, which certainly does threaten Ashton's Pokemon, both with the speed drops and the paralysis, but I think that the fake tears is a bit scarier, especially when you have your own Thunder Wave on top of that.
Yeah, so that other Thunder Wave from Ashton's Grimmsnarl, absolutely huge to paralyze this Entei, but Rafa's Thunder Wave does not go into that Volcarona, and this Entei becomes fully paralyzed this turn and able to go for any moves. So this paralysis from both players is absolutely paying dividends here, allowing them to, you know, slow down the field of play a little bit and make it so that some of these opponents can't get any super effective attacks off, especially if this Entei has something to deal with the Volcarona.
I mean, fortunately for Rafa, he will be able to paralyze that Volcarona before it can move, thanks to the fact that its Thunder Wave will be a priority as well, but both these Pokemon now have to contend with the possibility of being fully paralyzed.
Yeah, absolutely. The Volcarona, though, like you said, does get paralyzed. Entei will be moving faster, does 50% of its HP with a Sacred Fire, and then another foul play from the Grimmsnarl on Ashton's side. So Ashton's Grimmsnarl is very offensive in a way, and they both will be taking a Heat Wave from the Volcarona as well. Critical hit on the Grimmsnarl, not enough to knock it out, though, and won't be able to burn that Entei because it is paralyzed, and also a Fire type, but no burn on the Grimmsnarl. So Ashton's Grimmsnarl build is really interesting to me, Gabby.
It is, because he opted to only carry one screen, you know, rather than bringing both Light Screen and Reflect. I believe we saw him bring Light Screen, and then he has the fake tears, the Thunder Wave, and the foul play to provide support, which is something that Rafa is going to have to be very careful about, since Thunder Wave can be really frustrating to play against.
Yeah, that Grimmsnarl, though, is burned by a Sacred Fire, goes for a foul play into the Entei, does a pretty good chunk of damage, and then a foul play as well from Rafa into the Grimmsnarl, does a smaller amount of chip. Another Heat Wave from this Volcarona, so Volcarona does not knock out this Entei, it lives on 2 HP, but gets rid of this Grimmsnarl finally. That has been so pesky, but this has been an absolutely crazy kind of turn of momentum, I believe, because now you have to send in a Ditto on this side in front of a Grimmsnarl, and even though this Grimmsnarl, you know, it's a Focus Sash Ditto because we know where the Choice Scarf is here, and it is on this Entei. It means that, you know, you may not be able to do as much or move as fast as you'd like to in terms of the other Grimmsnarl's speed.
And that is unfortunate for Rafa, but, you know, the Grimmsnarl that he copied does have a couple of choices for moves, and I think that's going to be important. The other thing that I want to figure out is what is Ashton's last Pokemon, because if the Ditto is able to paralyze it when it comes out onto the field, and if Entei is able to, as a result, continue to outspeed and deal some big damage with Sacred Fire, it might not be game over for it, even though it's down to the last 2 HP of its health.
Yeah, Volcarona, though, is going to protect, so it's not going to take any damage. Sacred Fire will go right into that slot so that Entei is not able to go anywhere with that last 2 HP. Spirit Break from one Grimmsnarl onto the other with that burn is enough to knock out the Grimmsnarl on Ashton's side. So this will reveal whatever Ashton has in the back, and it will, I believe, end that that light screen that Grimmsnarl had as well, to reveal that it isn't carrying that Light Clay. Rillaboom is the Pokemon of choice here for Ashton at the back. Will set up grassy terrain, help heal up a little bit, but I mean, if you're going for something something like a Grassy Glide or even something like a Wood Hammer for some extra power, I think you're in a nice spot.
Yeah, you can Grassy Glide the Entei this turn to pick up the KO, and then you just have to do damage to Ditto for 2 turns. And even if those paralyses do come in play on the Rillaboom and the Volcarona, the fact of the matter is Ditto is not going to be able to out-damage those Pokemon. So a very well-played game from Ashton already. I really like how he utilized the Grimmsnarl in that match to provide support to the Lunala and to ensure that the Lunala was able to keep threatening knockouts, even with the presence of Light Screen up on Rafa's side of the field. So going into game 2, I think that Rafa has a pretty challenging question ahead of him, which is like, how do I stop this Grimmsnarl from going for the paralysis, from going for the Spirit Breaks and the foul play and the screens? And how do I ensure that my Grimmsnarl is able to provide the support that I need to take this Lunala down? I think that you have to be a little bit more greedy with those Thunder Waves. You can utilize the fact that Groudon can't be paralyzed either to some success. Maybe if you try and switch Groudon in, if you anticipate a paralysis or something, that could be one possibility. But I think that ultimately you have to get rid of that Grimmsnarl immediately after you remove Lunala from the field. You can't necessarily prioritize the Grimmsnarl over the Lunala, I think, just because Lunala is that scary of a restricted Pokemon to face, especially in this kind of matchup. But definitely a very tough position for Rafa, whereas Ashton, despite the fact that both trainers were brought down to their last 2 Pokemon towards the end, just felt like he had a very comfortable lead momentum-wise throughout Game 1.
And it's really crazy to me, Gabby, how important that white herb ended up being to allow that Groudon to at least go for a second, to survive really that first turn where Ashton pulled no punches and went for a fake Tears and a Moongeist Beam right out of the gate. So we're not entirely sure. Maybe that Lunala is carrying a Meteor Beam. Maybe it has that Power Herb. It doesn't look like there's any Trick Room on that team, so at least that isn't something that you need to really worry about in terms of stopping Trick Room to go up, and there isn't really any fake out pressure that you really could have done because Rillaboom stayed back here for Rafa, and the Rillaboom for Ashton's side hit in the back the entire time to possibly put pressure on the Groudon later in the game if the Groudon was able to make it past those first few turns, which sadly it was not, even with that help from that Light Screen and help from its partner Pokemon Grimmsnarl. Grimmsnarl Regieleki, though, will be the lead this game. So Regieleki, a bit of a switch up here for Ashton, and then Grimmsnarl and Groudon this turn. So Groudon actually starting off this game, unlike that last game where it came in later.
And Groudon's certainly in a better position here because even if Grimmsnarl connects a fake Tears with it, Regieleki's not going to be able to deal any damage to Groudon, barring like a Hyper Beam or something, which, I guess if you're running Tears, yeah, that could be something that could exist on Regieleki, but I don't necessarily see it knocking out a Groudon even with the help. So Ashton most likely forced to protect and or switch this Regieleki immediately this turn 1, which will give Groudon the opportunity to go a bit more on the offense than we saw it do in Game 1. And if those Precipice Blades are able to connect, that's going to put Rafa in a much better start to this game.
Yeah, Reflect from the Grimmsnarl on Rafa's side, while a Volt Switch from the Regieleki is going to send Regieleki back for Ashton and allow him to possibly bring in another Pokemon that may be able to deal with this Groudon a little bit better, especially because this Reflect came up and not the Light Screen. It's going to be pretty helpful to deal with this Rillaboom, who has that really powerful grass that really powerful attack set to deal with things with that Grassy Glide, especially this Groudon, who isn't going to want to deal with taking some sort of Grassy Glide or Wood Hammer, but a Precipice Blades is able to go off onto both of these Pokemon. That Grimmsnarl takes about 50% of its HP, Rillaboom about 25, and then the Grimmsnarl here goes for a Foul Play into the Groudon, does about 25% of its HP as well. So nice to have this recuperation of that HP from this grassy terrain, but definitely a different position for both of these players to be in.
The Groudon is still relatively comfortable here, barring the presence of the Rillaboom. I think that there's only so much that the Grimmsnarl can do to it, and that's something important that Rafa is going to have to keep in mind. I really like how he's opted to keep the Groudon on the field this turn, going for a Protect, because that will give him a little bit of a buffer for when Pokemon like Ditto, which I believe he did bring into this game, has to make an appearance on the field. And I don't think he necessarily wants to copy the Grimmsnarl or the Rillaboom at this point. So by protecting Groudon and going for a switch with your Grimmsnarl, you can go ahead and switch the Groudon out next turn, send your Grimmsnarl back in, and then hopefully maneuver into a position where Groudon can make an appearance once the Rillaboom has been removed.
Yeah, and Entei is a Pokemon that loves looking down a Rillaboom, even with, some stronger attacks. Protect, like you said, Groudon will be going for not taking any damage from something like a Grassy Glide here that this Rillaboom went for, not able to come out. Then the Spirit Break from the Grimmsnarl onto the Entei does very little damage for Entei, but it most importantly drops that special attack stat. And, this Entei, it's probably not special here, but it is able to... I have seen some Eruption Entei, I believe, today, Gabby, so it could happen, but probably not.
I was going to say, we did see a Choice Scarf Eruption Entei, so, I mean, you never know, right? It's definitely something that you have to worry about, but I think that Spirit Break was more hoping to catch a knockout onto the opposing Grimmsnarl than anything else. Going into this turn, this Groudon does have a bit of a tough spot to be in, as Grassy Glide will be a priority move, but Reflect is still active on the field, and that Reflect may mean it can take one attack from this Rillaboom, and then retaliate back with a Fire-type attack for the knockout.
Yeah, but this Entei will be moving much slower as it is now paralyzed from a Thunder Wave from the Grimmsnarl. Heat Crash, though, from the Groudon into the Rillaboom is enough to take it out, so now that Rillaboom is off of the field, not able to put some pressure on with something like a Grassy Glide or a Wood Hammer moving forward, and then the Flare Blitz here from the Entei into the Grimmsnarl is enough to knock it out, so a great amount of damage this turn from that Entei, not dealing with a full paralysis, and this puts Rafa in a much better position, because now Ashton, if he wants to bring in that Lunala, he's not going to be able to go for something like a Fake Tears to help mitigate the damage to this Groudon.
He isn't, and that's the key difference between games 1 and 2 for Rafa. Even though we saw the Groudon immediately lose the Fake Tears thanks to the Power Herb in game 1, Ashton was able to use Fake Tears to drop that Groudon special defense again, and at that point Groudon was removed from the field. Rafa doesn't have Light Screen up, which means this Lunala's attacks are still certainly going to hurt, but there's no reason why he shouldn't be able to go for a Precipice Blades plus another Flare Blitz from this Entei. Use Precipice Blades to break the Shadow Shield on the Lunala, most likely KO the Regieleki, as it is a Regieleki and won't be too defensive. And then again, just sort of play through the rest of that end game with 4 Pokemon to 1.
Yeah, this Entei, though, is going to take a Thunderbolt with a ton of damage, leaving it with only 5 HP. Moonblast into that Groudon who protected this turn, and then a Flare Blitz from this Entei will go into this Lunala slot. This will knock itself out with that recoil damage, most importantly. Gets a burn, though, which is super helpful here for this Entei. One thing I like about Ashton with his switch-ins is he was careful with his positioning, putting his Lunala in front of the Groudon, because that Groudon probably wants to stay on the field where it is, so you wouldn't be able to switch it into a Ditto and maybe get a little bit of a better chance. So if Rafa switches in his Ditto here, it would copy this Regieleki. He could also switch in the Grimmsnarl maybe and go for something like a Screens.
If he copies the Regieleki, then that means he'll also copy the speed stat of that Regieleki and will be faster than the Lunala, which is something that could be a little bit interesting to play out. But, the Ditto doesn't necessarily have to be a Regieleki, I think, for Rafa to win this game. And I like that he sends in the Grimmsnarl to recognize that, since this will give Grimmsnarl the opportunity to go for a Light Screen, which will certainly help out the Ditto. Yes, it's true that the Ditto is holding a Focus Sash, so it kind of is bulky, but, it's going to be a lot better off with the Light Screen to support it, and realistically at this point, there's not enough time in this game for Ashton to stall out the remainder of Light Screen, so Rafa just dealing the damage where he can find it with this Groudon, and going to just copy whatever he can when the Ditto comes out on the field. There's no bad choice here.
Yeah, absolutely. A Moonblast will go through this Light Screen that Grimmsnarl set up, who also took a Thunderbolt as well, with not as much damage as it did to the Entei. This Light Screen is absolutely huge to mitigate the damage from that Moonblast. Takes very little and is enough to get that Heat Crash off into this Lunala and knock it out. So now it's Regieleki who's looking down at Groudon, which is not Regieleki's favorite place in the world to be. Especially, I think, dealing with something with this Grimmsnarl that has some offensive move and foul play and could possibly break a Focus Sash if it has one, but this could be a good time to get information if Ashton doesn't forfeit.
I'm pretty sure we'll see Ashton lock in a forfeit here, just because the item that this Regieleki is holding is really going to be important in Game 3, as barring the Groudon, it does a really good job of threatening the Pokemon on Rafa's team, and Looking at how game 1 was played out against game 2, I think that Rafa was able to find a few more openings in this game 1 by leaving that Groudon on the field in situations where Ashton probably assumed it would switch out, and as a result, was able to find the knockouts with Heat Crash. That is certainly some good information for Ashton, as I don't think all Groudon run Heat Crash. It certainly is a popular move, but it's not necessarily, I think, the most common fire move on Groudon at this point. So still, very, very, very strong play from both these trainers, and bringing us into a game 3, which should be really exciting.
Oh, I completely agree. It's been crazy to see. These games are moving pretty fast, right? Even if you've got screens set up, and screens are such a nice way to slow down a game and make it a little bit easier for you to deal with some pretty powerful attackers. But both of these players are moving pretty quick. They're locking in move choices fast. They're choosing their teams pretty quickly. And that Ditto didn't even need to come in that last game, so it was nice for Rafa to have some information hidden from Ashton, even if he wasn't able to find out what the item was on that Regieleki. But, I think having that lead with the Groudon right in front is really nice, because that White Herb is so tough for that turn 1, especially if that Grimmsnarl wants to go for something like a fake Tears again, which was a good way of stopping that damage from that Groudon to go on for the entire game.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, because if you think about it, games 1 and games 2, the only difference in leads was on Ashton's side of the field, and Ashton electing to bring the Regieleki as one of his Pokemon in the front really did put him at a disadvantage, knowing that Rafa was going to lead Groudon a second time. Going into this game 3, I think he has to return to his strategy from game 1 and lead the Lunala plus the Grimmsnarl, knowing that if the Groudon is in front once again for Rafa, he can, set up the Reflect to help protect the Lunala a bit more. He can use Shadow Shield effectively. He can go for those Moongeist beams. There's just a lot more flexibility in that lead compared to Regieleki, who's forced to immediately pivot out with either a hard switch or a volt switch and deal damage that way. That all being said, we do have the benefit of seeing Rafa's thinking here as he works through this team preview, and it looks like he's about to lock into not leading that Groudon. So if Ashton is able to call that and send in the Regieleki at this point next to the Grimmsnarl, then all he has to do is go for another Thunder Wave and an attack into that Entei. It'll be an easy knockout. Rafa cannot paralyze that Regieleki again, but it looks like we get yet another lead from Ashton instead.
Yeah, Ashton brings the Rillaboom and the Lunala instead of bringing a Grimmsnarl possibly, but the Grimmsnarl and the Entei for Rafa. So some nice fake out pressure at a bare minimum here with that Rillaboom, I believe, Gabby. But you still have to worry about possibly finding a way to break the Shadow Shield, because if you fake out the Grimmsnarl, you stop the screens, but if you fake out the Entei, then you could deal with something like a foul play as well.
Yeah, I think that Grimmsnarl is going to have to set up light screen, just given how this game is played out, and as a result, I think you just let it get that light screen set up. The sooner it's on the field, the sooner it leaves the field. So fake out would only just make your life a little bit harder when you think about it in that sense. Whereas if you were to try and go for some damage instead, as you cannot flinch Entei due to inner focus, then you're going to get closer to moving the Pokemon off the field, at which point you just don't have to worry about them anymore. That also being said, we could see this Rillaboom try and rotate around, but it looks like it's just opting to stop the screens for starters.
Yeah, we'll be stopping screens. Entei goes for a Sacred Fire, enough to knock that Rillaboom out very quickly with a critical hit to boot. So this Rillaboom is completely off the field already. Not going to be able to go for something like a Grassy Glide into that Groudon later. But a Moongeist Beam will come out from this Lunala. We'll still do a bunch of damage onto either of these Pokemon because no light screen was set up. Onto this Entei, it does well over half, pretty much close to 3/4 of that HP. Getting a little bit of health back from that grassy terrain though, but it will not survive another one of those.
Without light screen, it won't survive another one of those. But with light screen and another turn of grassy terrain recovery, I think it's going to be close. And I find it really curious that the Regieleki is coming out onto the field, since while the Grimmsnarl, its options are really limited at this point. Ashton could try and go for a electric type attack into the Grimmsnarl, have Lunala then go for a attack to try and knock out the Entei this turn, and then next turn maybe lock into or go for a Electro Web or something to deal the little bit of chip damage you need on both these Pokemon to pick up the knockout. I think Entei's Sacred Fire is going to do a ton of damage here to whatever Pokemon that it connects with, but thanks to Shadow Shield, we know that's not going to be a knockout on the Lunala, and if there's a Focus Sash on this Regieleki, then that also will not be a knockout.
Yeah, but Electro Web will avoid the Entei here, so Entei not going to get a speed drop while this Grimmsnarl does, and takes a little bit of chip damage as well. Entei will be able to go for the Sacred Fire, but Lunala avoids the Sacred Fire, so everybody is missing their moves today. Lunala, though, goes for this Moongeist Beam. Through this Light Screen, though, we'll have to see if it's close. It is not enough to live. A critical hit as well. Maybe this Lunala is holding something like a Scope Lens, Gabby, but I do doubt it. So, interesting to see as well that Entei was knocked out in this turn and wasn't able to get off that Sacred Fire that would have really been helpful to break that Shadow Shield.
Regieleki also outsped the Entei, and there is no Thunder Wave or Tailwind or anything on the field, which does confirm that Ashton has a Choice Scarf on that Regieleki. Is a little bit unfortunate when you know it's staring down a Groudon, but we kind of had this conversation earlier on. It's not going to damage Groudon anyways, like that's just it. So knowing that Regieleki is forced to switch here, or actually no, I lied. It was just faster than that Entei regardless.
Yeah, I suppose so. They're faster than the Entei with a Volt Switch connecting into that Grimmsnarl. So Grimmsnarl takes a small amount of chip damage once again. This will allow Ashton to pivot out, bring in his Dragonite, who we haven't seen yet in this game, who, much like Entei, has that inner focus ability, cannot get a Intimidate or a Fake Out, but not any Fake Out coming out here. While we have the Moongeist Beam from this Lunala, targets into that Groudon, does a pretty good chunk of damage even though there is that Light Screen. Groudon goes for the Heat Crash like we saw before. This will break the Shadow Shield on this Lunala, most importantly, who is now going to take a Foul Play from this Grimmsnarl, and that is enough to knock it out. And I don't typically say that Grimmsnarl gets knockouts, even with critical hits to boot, but sometimes Grimmsnarl does exactly what it needs to do for these matches, so a really nice play from Rafa.
I mean, it helps a lot that the Foul Play uses your opponent's attack power instead of your own. I feel like that's Grimmsnarl's like way to cheat the damage calculations a little bit, but I absolutely agree. You know, it's not Pokemon to get those KOs as a result. The switch in of the Dragonite there would have been really nice to catch a Precipice Blades, as it is a flying type Pokemon and it will not be able to take that ground type damage, but unfortunately the Heat Crash was enough to put the Foul Play within knockout for that Lunala, and as a result Ashton is down to his last two Pokemon, whereas on Rafa's side of the field, you know, he still has the Grimmsnarl, he still has the Groudon, and he still has one Pokemon in the back. It's going to be up to this Dragonite to pick up a knockout on this Groudon somehow, as this Regieleki, I think, is going to have to just throw its most powerful attack into that Grimmsnarl slot and see what happens, since otherwise it's not going to be sticking around that long.
Yeah, a Reflect coming out from the Regieleki will be taking another Thunder, so that brings it down to 25 HP, so it's super, super close. Dual Wing Beat from this Dragonite is the move that it's going to be going for onto this Groudon, so it does do a nice amount of damage here, but it shows that it's Life Orb by taking a small amount of recoil. A Swords Dance from this Groudon is going to boost that attack, going to make this Groudon very tough to deal with, especially if it goes for a Heat Crash into this Dragonite, which is the only way it can hit it for not very effective damage, while everybody gets a little bit of grassy terrain recovery.
Yeah, the Reflect there, I think, definitely helped that Groudon take that Dual Wing Beat. Without it, Dual Wing Beat probably would be enough to pick up the knockout this turn. And now that the Reflect is up on the field, Rafa is free to go for a Thunder Wave into the Dragonite, which is exactly why Ashton used Protect on it this turn.
Yeah, Thunder Wave will not connect and slow down this Dragonite. Regieleki, though, will go for another Thunderbolt. Should knock out the Grimmsnarl here, and this will mean that Rafa has to bring in that Ditto. And Ditto switching into a Regieleki against a Dragonite, not the worst spot you could be in. Heat Crash will not connect onto that Dragonite either, but at least here Rafa's able to realize that his biggest threat is this Dragonite, while this Regieleki cannot attack him, and he's free to go for a Swords Dance in that last turn to get some major damage off.
Exactly. Like, I think a Heat Crash plus any attack from this Ditto will certainly be enough to knock out the Dragonite at this point in time. The one thing that we could wonder about here is whether or not Dragonite was inner focus or if it was multi-scale. I don't think it necessarily matters, as Dragonite has taken chip damage from Life Orb, which I think indicates that it probably wasn't going to be multi-scale anyways, but that could have possibly been some bulk to help Ashton get out of this situation. The Ditto is going to be able to take one hit from this Regieleki thanks to that Focus Sash, so Rafa has the ability to pick which Pokemon he wants to target for a KO, but Extreme Speed changes that quite quite differently.
Yeah, extreme speed plus a thunder into the Ditto here for Rafa is enough to knock out his Ditto Regieleki. So now it is just this Groudon who goes for the Heat Crash into this Dragonite slot. If it's enough to pick it out, it is not enough for the knockout. So it's going to take at least 2 more, maybe 3 more turns to get rid of Ashton's 2 Pokemon here because he can't double target them.
He can't, but neither can Ashton since he's locked into Thunderbolt. So the big question here is what attack is Dragonite going to go for? Is Ashton going to try and protect to maybe stall out the screens? I mean, Regieleki is protecting, so that's kind of nice. But again, Regieleki is not win this game for Ashton right now.
Yeah, at least it confirms again that it is not that Choice Scarf. But that means right here that I believe that is the Reflect that has ended, or no, sorry, the Sun has ended here, so that Heat Crash won't be as powerful, but not really going to matter too much because that Dragonite's not going to love taking any really amount of damage right now. Regieleki, like you said, can't attack this Groudon, so I think that's going to be important to know moving forward. Regieleki, though, going to try and go for a Thunder, will not affect it. Another dual Wing Beat from the Groudon will do some nice damage here, so at least this Groudon is going to be able to, with that extra Life Orb chip, be able to do some damage to this Dragonite. That Dragonite had enough HP to survive, so it will mean that this Heat Crash wasn't able to go into the Regieleki on the next turn, but Regieleki, I think, is kind of a sitting duck here, Gabby.
It's unfortunate, but you're absolutely right. There's nothing this Regieleki can do to win the game at this point. You know, shoutouts to Ashton. I love the reveal of the Dragonite that last game, and you know, bringing it to sort of stop the Precipice Blades from running rampant through your team. Unfortunately, though, with the help of Reflect, those dual Wing Beats just could not outdamage the Groudon, and even if Ashton was able to find a knockout on the Groudon, the Life Orb recoil would have been enough to pick up the KO onto the Dragonite. So Spain very confidently moving on 5-2, I believe, into the next round. So congratulations to them, and congratulations to the US. We saw some interesting teams from both sides of this matchup in particular, as well as some really well played games. So that was super exciting to watch.
Yeah, it's an incredible showcase of talent from both of these regions, an incredible showcase of talent from all of these top 8 teams. And I mean, every team before this as well. But this means that we're moving on. We only have 2 more weekends left of casting, Gabby, which is heartbreaking for me, but it's exciting for these players who are